Are you tired of seeing the same old cold sorceress videos and just want something different to watch? Well, look no further. I present to you my hardcore boner necromancer. I've been playing a ton of D2R lately over on my Twitch channel, and I've been having a lot of fun and success with my boner necromancer on hardcore. But lately, I've been getting a ton of questions about my gear, how to level, and how the build feels, so I thought I'd just make a video on it. First, let's talk a little bit about the leveling experience and skill setup. I started this character out as a summon necromancer, but if you're familiar with D2 at all, then you'll know that summons really begin to struggle towards the end of normal and into nightmare. So around Act 5 and normal, I respect to bone. But if you are starting fresh with the bone necromancer, then I'd suggest leveling with teeth and then graduating to bone spear at level 18. At level 6, you want to put a point into clay golem, and at level 12, the Iron Maiden curse. Using Iron Maiden on bosses and letting them smack your golem until they kill themselves is a very effective method for killing the first few bosses on normal. I personally feel like this little trick falls off pretty hard after Mephisto, but you're more than welcome to give it a shot on Diablo and Bale if you want to. If you're playing hardcore, then it might also be a good idea to at least throw a point into bone armor early on to help keep you alive. Once you get into Nightmare, you'll want to respec and start working towards your final tree setup. Put a point into Teeth, Bone Armor, Corpse Explosion, Bone Wall, Bone Spear, and Bone Prison. Then you'll want to max out Bone Spear, then Bone Prison, and Bone Wall. At this point, you could decide to max out Bone Spirit or Teeth. I don't think it matters much because Bone Spear will be outdamaging both of them, but I think Bone Spear can be more useful in certain situations, so I'd suggest going with Bone Spirit. And lastly, for the Bone Tree, you have a choice to put the rest of your points into Teeth or Corpse Explosion. I decided to alternate between the two, but if you'd rather dump your points into Teeth, then I'd recommend getting your Corpse Explosion to at least level 10 before doing so. As for the Summoning and Curse skill trees, you'll want to grab the skills that you'll be using from here before investing heavily into your Bone Spear synergies. I personally like putting a point into Clay Golem, Golem Mastery, and Summon Resist. For hardcore, I find the Clay Golem to be invaluable, but you could definitely play without it. In the Curses tree, you'll want to put a point into Amplify Damage, and then Weaken and Terror so you can grab Decrepify. If you're playing in a group with people who are dealing elemental damage, then you could also grab Lower Resist to help them out as well. Now let's talk about my current gear setup and possible gear upgrades. For my wand, I'm using the white rune word to significantly boost my Bone Spear damage. To get a base wand for this, you'll want to shop wands from Drognen in Act 2 normal, and look for wands with at least +2 to Bone Spear on them. I got one with +3 to Bone Spear, but if you really wanted to invest a bunch of time into this, you could get a really good wand base. If you wanted to, you could get a wand with plus to Bone Spear and Revives, so you could have a few additional summons to help keep you safe. Or maybe a wand with Decrepify and plus to Bone Spear to save you a couple points on the tree. Either way, a white wand will end up being your end-game weapon, so make sure to grab it when you can. For my helmet, I'm wearing a Shaco that's currently socketed with the perfect topaz for the extra magic find. This will be the helmet that you want for endgame as well. You could also opt in for an in the socket to get some extra resistances if you feel like you need them. My current amulet just has +1 to poison and bone skills with some life and cold resistance. Your endgame amulet would either be Amara's Kaleidoscope or a really well-rolled rare amulet with plus to skills, faster cast rate, and other useful stats like resistances and life. My current shield is the Spirit Rune Word, which also happens to be the endgame shield you want unless you want to go for max block. Then you'll want a Homunculus instead due to the high base block chance that item has. The biggest downside to using the Homunculus though is the loss of FCR that the Spirit provides. As for my boots, they are just a pair of rare boots with some MF and resists. Ideally for endgame, I'd have a similar pair of boots with run walk speed on them, or I'd just wear a pair of really well rolled war travelers and call it a day. My current rings are just poorly rolled rares to keep my resistances high, but for endgame rings you'd want FCR, resists, and other useful stats. If you don't need any resistances or FCR from your rings, then a Stone of Jordan or a Bulkathos wedding band are both great options. Again, my belt is just a rare that's supplying some resistance. I've been trying to craft a belt for the last few days with some good rolls and some FCR, but haven't landed one yet. If you do manage to craft a decent belt, then that will hold you over until you can get your hands on an arachnid mesh, which is the ideal belt for this build. For my gloves, I'm wearing trangs, which are best in slot, but mage fists will work as well if you can't get a pair of trangs. For my armor, I'm wearing a smoke for the extra resistances. Just like most other builds in this game, you'd want an enigma for your chest armor, and you'd most likely want it socketed into something like a mage plate because the enigma gives you a bunch of extra strength, which allows you to put more points into vitality. On your weapon swap, you'd want a call to arms for the barb shouts and another spirit to buff those shouts further. And lastly, for your charms, you want plus to poison and bone skills on your grand charms, and stats like resistance, life, and magic find on your large and small charms. Now I want to briefly talk about the Mercenary. You'll want an Act 2 defensive Mercenary from Nightmare. The holy freeze they provide is invaluable, and when coupled with your Decrepify, most enemies become harmless. For their gear, you'll definitely want an Insight for their weapon, but their armor and helmet are interchangeable. I'm currently using a Treachery on mine, which provides 45% attack speed and a chance for them to gain Fade when hit. But if you want a tankier Mercenary, then Chains of Honor is the go-to chest piece. I had to throw a Guillaume's face on for the extra strength so they could wear the current polearm, but honestly, this helmet is insane for bossing. The amount of damage my Mercenary does with his helmet and Treachery is pretty unreal, and will most likely be my go-to setup for when I get an Enigma and can start efficiently farming more bosses. But for doing my normal farming areas, I'd rather he wear something with lifesteal or some resistances, so I normally throw a Talrash's helmet on him. If I had an additional socket quest, I'd consider using it on the helm to throw an Amethyst in there to give him the extra strength he needs for the elite polearm. Or if I had an Endariel's Visage, I'd throw that on him, which would give him the strength he needs alongside some extra attack speed. You also might want to consider socketing a Ral rune in the Andy's helm to help negate the negative fire res it provides. For your character stats, you just want enough strength and dex to wear your items, and then the rest goes into your vitality. If you're trying to get max block though, then you'll want to invest into dexterity until reaching the block cap, then the minimum required strength for your gear, and the rest into vitality. And lastly, I want to talk a bit about the playstyle of this character. The Bone Necromancer is a very active playstyle with quite a few keybinds. You'll be actively switching between your amplified damage and Decrepify curses depending on the situations you're in. And if you find yourself in a bad position, you could swap to Bone Prison and just begin walling everything off. You'll also want to be swapping to Corpse Explosion when there are enough monsters to effectively hit with it, while utilizing your Bone Spear to snipe off troublesome enemies. But most of the time, you can get away with running in, casting Decrepify or Amplify damage on everything, then hitting them with Bone Spear. Once one of them dies, you can swap to Corpse Explosion and hopefully get a chain reaction started. Funny enough, in an area like the cow level, which is probably the best place to farm for a Necromancer before getting an Enigma by the way, you can actually get away with just cursing everything and waiting for your Mercenary to get a kill to start killing everything else with Corpse Explosion. That can be a bit risky though, but just something I thought I'd mention. And that covers the hardcore boner necro. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you have any questions, make sure to ask them in the comments below and I'll try my best to answer them. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time.